This time last year, I filmed a video in which I went through my 5 favourite books of the year so far and my 5-star predictions for like the second half of the year. And my plan was to do that video again, except that I have run into what is quite a good problem to have, but I've run into the problem of I couldn't narrow it down to 5 books. I tried. I really did try. I'm not capable of it. So instead I bring you my top 10 books of the year so far, and probably still 5-star predictions. I haven't thought that far ahead yet, but we're going to start with my top books of the year. We are, roughly speaking, halfway through the year. I have currently, so far this year, read 44 books, I believe. And as I said, was going to give you top 5. I just couldn't narrow it down, so we are doing top 10, which is like quite nice, because for some reason I felt like I wasn't having a great reading year. I don't know why, I just felt like I'd had a bunch of books that were good but not like standouts, but then I was going back through my list and I was like, no, I do have a lot of really good ones. So I don't know where that thinking came from, but I do in fact have my top 10 books for you of the year so far. With any luck, in the second half of this year, I'm going to have a whole load more. So I assume by the end of this year, not all of these books are going to make it onto the top 10 of the year list, like you would kind of hope that some of them wouldn't, but I think some of them definitely are gonna. I'm gonna go in no particular order, and the very first book on today's list is Shark Heart. This is a literary fiction about a man turning into a great white shark. A very strange little concept that, as far as I can tell, is actually a metaphor for terminal illness, and this book reads like a stomach punch, in the best way. The book is kind of broken up into, I guess, 2 different sections. We're kind of following 2 different lots of characters, which at first really threw me, because when we got to sort of the end of the first half of the story, I was really sad that it was over, but then I ended up falling just as deeply in love with the second lot of characters, and they are connected. But this book made me weep multiple times, and it's very rare that a book makes me cry and doesn't then get 5 stars, because I'm not a huge crier, and I cried multiple times in this book. The book is also about an actor. Our main guy is an actor, and there are so many conversations in there about like all the things he wanted to achieve and some of the dreams that he felt like he compromised. And if you don't know, I am an actor, and I just found all of that material and all of those conversations just so insightful and just absolutely stunning to read about. This book is also completely bingeable because it's written in vignettes and poems and play extracts and some prose, and it means that all of this different like mixed media makes it not only stunning but so quick to read, so you end up just flying through it. I also think it's a great book if you're not hugely into literary fiction and you're trying to get into literary fiction. And I say that as a litfic lover. I think it's also great if you already love litfic, but if you want one to get into, and people are always asking me for books to get into literary fiction, that is a great one. Next, I am going to go with Mad Honey. This is a literary mystery book that I, obviously bought because I thought I was going to like it. I kind of thought it would be a good time, like a 4-star read. This book blew me out of the water. I can't even tell you how perfect this book was. There is very little that I'm going to say about the plot, because you need to go in as blind as possible, because there are so many layers to this book that you will not be able to get from the blurb, from the cover. Just trust me that this book is stunning. This book follows a girl who dies and then the boy who is on trial for killing her. And it's 2 perspectives. It's the girl leading up to her death, and it is the mother of the boy on trial. The writing is flawless. The characters are so complicated, some of whom are just so lovable. The plot moves quickly. It is structured so well. There is just nothing about this book that isn't flawless. And then this messaging that you don't really get a hold of until sort of halfway through the book. You don't know that it's coming. It is just handled so beautifully and so well integrated into the story, and the messaging is just stunning and so important. And then equally the plot is just fast moving and gripping and written wonderfully. As I say, I can't tell you a whole lot about this book other than please trust me, please read it. It is perfect. Then, one of the oddest books that I have read all year, but equally the best title. that I have probably ever read. It lasts forever and then it's over. This is a tiny little literary fiction about a zombie apocalypse. I think the book is around 200 pages, maybe under. It's tiny, and it is a story of a zombie losing her humanity, and it's a conversation of loss and love, and it's very, very, very weird and gross at parts and heartbreaking and weirdly relatable. The story might be about a zombie, but at its core it feels so deeply human. There are gorgeous quotes in this. It's very existential, strange. It is basically about a zombie kind of wandering around. There's not inherently a load of plot. It's a very character-driven story, but the quotes, the concepts, it is just fascinating. If you like a character-driven lit fic and you're down for something a bit weird and a bit existential, give it a go, because I have never read anything like this and it is just stuck with me. It is so unique, and I promise you, you won't have read anything like it. Then a book that I think is going to make its way into a lot of people's top 10 at the end of the year, and a book I wasn't even intending to read, but I'm so glad I did because I loved it, like all the other girlies. Sunrise on the Reaping. Obviously, the new Hunger Games book, Hamish's backstory, just as heartbreaking as I was expecting it to be, but also just so nostalgic, with one of what I think is like a fan favourite. Everyone loves Hamish, right? I already loved him. I will say this book made me love him even more. Maisie was one of my absolute favourite parts of this story. I loved her. I wish we'd had more of her, but I loved her. Plot moved quickly. The politics and the conversations, as always, were there, and they were so well integrated into the story. I feel like Suzanne Collins did it again. It can be a risk coming back to such a popular series and adding more books on, because in some ways it is almost impossible to meet people's expectations, and yet I feel like she did it. Or at least she met mine, because I adored this. I am still yet to read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't know if I'm going to go back and read it, but I might do. I might have to. I have seen the film. I'm excited for the Sunrise film, and supposedly there's another book coming, potentially an Effie book. I've heard rumours. I don't know if they're true, but Sunrise was great. I think it's going to be on a lot of people's lists at the end of the year, and for good reason. Then, the book that is currently in my #1 spot, and if I'm being so completely for real with you guys, I don't see it getting dethroned. I don't see a world in which this book isn't my favourite book at the end of the year. Now, part of me hopes that I'm wrong, because I don't necessarily want to have already found my favourite book of the year. Like, I want to think there are loads of really great books in my future, but I just don't see a world in which anything beats this. That is, of course, The Nursery. I read this book a few months back and I literally have not stopped thinking about it, and I haven't stopped talking about it. This book follows a woman who has just had a baby and she is suffering with, I don't think it's ever explicitly said, but she's suffering with postnatal depression or postpartum depression. Almost the entire book is set in her apartment. It's a very solitary book. She is almost completely alone. She does kind of befriend an old man upstairs, and her husband is in it a little bit, but it's primarily a very solitary book of her and the baby. This is a very bleak book, and it's a very character-driven book, but the conversations in this book, the quotes in this book, blew me out of the water. I tabbed so many quotes. In my video, I read a whole bunch of them because I was that floored by the writing. I think if you enjoyed my year of rest and relaxation, you would also enjoy this, because they're very similar in the sense of very bleak, very complicated character study, all set kind of in an apartment, very isolated, but just incredible writing. I think if you're a fan of that book, you will enjoy this one. I could literally talk about this book for an age, but I'm not going to, because I feel like I've actually spoken about this book so much this year. But this was everything. I think it was also a debut, which is insane, and I cannot wait to see what else this author writes, because some of the writing in that book is now etched into my brain and I fear it will never leave. Then, I think our first and potentially only book in this list that isn't a literary fiction, we have Light by Michael Grant, because no book in the history of me reading books has broken me the way this book broke me. If you don't know, this is the final book in the Gone series, which is a YA dystopia series about a bunch of kids who get trapped in a dome, all the adults disappear and they develop magical powers. It's a very nostalgic series for me because I read almost the entire thing when I was a kid, and I kind of reread and then finished this series up at the start of this year. And Light was the last one that I needed to read. It was my favourite in the series. I loved all of them, but this was my favourite. And the ending of this book, I don't know if it's just the 10 years of nostalgia or equally just how attached I was to the characters, or if it was the writing. I think it was a bit of like all of the above. But something about the ending of this book, well, I know quite specifically what it was, but I can't say it without spoiling it. Something in this book broke me. I think it's the only time I've appeared in a video actually crying, because I just had to tell you in that moment how shattering the ending of that book was. Again, a lot of that is 10 years of nostalgia, but this series is probably the series that got me into reading as a kid, and it was a shattering but kind of perfectly beautiful ending to the series. So it's in the top 10. Next, a book that I am not even remotely surprised is in this list, because she was my favourite book of last year. That is of course Ottessa Moshfegh, and the book is Eileen. As I say, my year of rest and relaxation was my #1 book pick for last year, so I wanted to read everything else she'd written, so I started with her debut. This book follows a woman living quite a miserable life, and she works in a prison, and then a woman called Rebecca starts working at the prison and Eileen becomes quite obsessed with her. Ottessa Moshfegh has just completely asserted herself in my mind as one of my favourite authors. I've only read 2 of her books, but I just know that I'm going to adore everything else that she writes. I currently have no more of her books on my TBR, so I don't know where to go next, so I am taking suggestions if anybody has some. I am so excited to read everything else on her backlist, because she just does unlikable character studies to a T. Like, she does them so well. This book had all the gorgeousness that my year of rest and relaxation had, and it actually had a little bit more plot going on in this one. My year of R&R is very character driven. This one is still super character driven, but there's a little bit more going on, particularly towards the end. It's actually quite a fast moving plot. And the writing, once again, just stunned me. Then we have Sorrow and Bliss. This book I actually sort of struggled to explain the plot of, maybe because there isn't inherently one. It's very character driven. We're following a woman and her husband, mostly the woman. She is struggling, and we kind of get these small snippets into her life. The book is very broken up into like paragraphs, and between a lot of the paragraphs is an asterisk, and it kind of just moves you forward in time. It is very much the sort of writing that throws you into different moments in her life, and there's not a whole bunch of like waffle in the middle of how she got there and what she did in her day. It's sort of just like, we're doing this and now we're doing this. And something about that quite drawn back writing style just works for me. It's not for everyone. I've heard people say that they don't like that kind of a writing style, but I do. This writing was beautiful, the storytelling was immaculate, and again, really want to read some more from this author. Then another quite recent addition to the list, we have The Rachel Incident. This book is a depiction of the chaotic mess that is your 20s. We're following James and Rachel, and they are 2 best friends living in Cork, working in a bookstore, and we follow them over quite a few years throughout different relationships, throughout different friendships. I think if you're in or around your 20s, you will find this book so deeply relatable in good and bad ways. I think there are so many parts of the story that you will be able to recognise yourself in. Even reading this book, I was literally picturing them living in my second year uni house. Something about how the story was told just so deeply reminded me of when I was at uni, and this quite disgusting little house that we used to live in, with a very bad mould problem, with a very bad rat problem. But the writing style just took me back to that time period of all of the highs and all of the lows of like being at uni in that kind of time of my life. And it was also just such a bingeable story. Like, the chapters were short, the plot was fast moving. Everything about this book was fun and relatable, but equally tender and heartbreaking in moments. I loved every single page of this book and I couldn't recommend it enough. I also think it's a good one for, again, getting into litfic, but equally a book stump book. Would highly recommend that one. And last, but again not least, because these are not in any particular order, we have Talking at Night. This one is recommended for fans of normal people, and I'm always a little bit skeptical when I see comparisons to Sally Rooney, but no, I get it. This very much gave normal people energy. We're following two people who something tragic happens to them, and you follow them over the years of like a kind of on again, off again relationship between them, and how a lot of the problems that they face in their lives come back to this one moment that happens right at the start of the book. I tabbed so many quotes in this book because, again, this is another one where a lot of the conversations felt very relatable in good and bad ways. A little bit like Sally Rooney, there are no quotation marks, which I am really coming to love. I know, again, that it's not for everyone, but I've read a few books now that does that, and I don't know what it is, but something about it just makes it flow so perfectly for me. Something about there being no break between the dialogue and the prose. Something about it just, it scratches something in my brain. I love it. This book didn't end how I wanted it to end. I was kind of craving something else. I still gave it 5 stars. I still absolutely adored it. I think the majority of people will love the ending of this book. I think just because, actually I can't say it without spoiling anything, but I was craving a slightly different ending, but I still loved it. Okay, if I've counted correctly, that is my top 10. And for part 2 of this video, very quickly, just a quick little addition, I'm going to go through 5 of the books currently on my TBR that I haven't read yet that are the predictions for books that I think are going to join this list at the end of the year. So the 5 books currently on my TBR that I think are most likely to be 5 stars. You got it, I over-explained it. Number 1, talking of Sally Rooney, of course, is gonna be Intermezzo. I have just ordered my copy. It should actually be here any day now. I am so excited. As I say, I've given every single one of Sally Rooney's books 5 stars, and I have seen so many people say that this is her best book, which I don't even know how to fathom that because her other books were perfect. So if this is her best one, I'm ready, I'm excited. This one is about 2 brothers who are grieving, and one of them is a lawyer, one is a chess player, and I think it's kind of her classic thing of messy relationships. I know nothing else, I don't want to know anything else. Best believe when that book arrives, I am reading it immediately. Next, a book I have technically started. I've read a few pages and I've kind of put it down for the time being, only because I think I've read too many books in short succession with this theme. So I kind of want to save this book for a little bit. But Nightb is getting read soon. This is another book kind of similar to The Nursery about a struggling mother, and it's very character driven, except in this one she is turning into a dog. So it's kind of got a little bit of the wacky horror maybe going on. I think I'm gonna love it. I just have read too many books recently about like dark depictions of motherhood, which is something this year I realised that I adore, but I think I've almost overdone it because I've read too many, because I got excited. I read The Nursery, realised I loved it, or read too many. So I'm gonna hold off on this one just for a little bit, but very much a 5-star prediction. Then Notes on an Execution. This is a book that we bought for a book club pick at some point. It hasn't happened yet. I think it's gonna happen soon, I hope. But I am very excited. I just have a feeling it's going to be a 5 stars. This one follows a man on death row, and I believe he killed a bunch of girls, but the story is not told from his perspective, it's told from the women in his life. So I think it's a detective, possibly a mother and a sister. I have heard the best reviews of this. I think the average rating on Goodreads is meant to be really, really high. Very high hopes for that one. Then, because again, she is a favourite author, and I literally can't believe I haven't read this yet. She's Always Hungry. Eliza Clark is one of my favourite authors. Boy Parts and Penance, her other 2 books, I have loved. This is a short story collection, which is not generally my jam, but do you know what is my jam? Eliza Clark. So I do have high hopes. It's like feminist horror literary stories. That's kind of all I know. Haven't seen any reviews of this one, but I love her writing so much. And last but not least on this little list of predictions, we have Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Again, Lisa Jewell is a favourite author of mine. She is my favourite thriller writer, and about a year ago, I guess, I saw Lisa Jewell do a talk, and she said that, like, according to readers and according to her fans, that her best 3 books, her most popular books, were None of This Is True, which I read and loved, The Family Upstairs, which I read and loved, and Then She Was Gone. So it's the last one in that like trio of books that, according to the author herself, are her most popular. It's the last one I'm yet to read. So I want to read it. Also, apparently it's her darkest book, and like a lot of her books are very dark, so consider me intrigued. I love a Lisa Jewell book, I love a dark book, so yeah, there's 5-star potential there. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much for watching. If you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments what you thought, or if there are any books that you know are on my TBR that you think could be 5-star predictions for me, let me know. Maybe I'll bump them up on my priority. If you're not already, please subscribe. I would love to have you like the video, comment, all that fun stuff, and I will catch you in the next one. I love you, goodbye!